Imagine you have access to what could be the most powerful artificial intelligence ever created. It can write flawless code in seconds, compose poetry that moves the soul, and solve complex physics problems that would take a human a lifetime. It is a gateway to the sum of human knowledge. You decide to ask it a simple question about modern history. But instead of an answer, you get this. This isn't a glitch. It isn't a bug. It's a feature. This is the reality of interacting with an AI born and raised inside the world's most sophisticated digital fortress. It's an intelligence that has been meticulously taught, not just what to know, but what not to know. It has been trained to be brilliant, creative, and useful, but above all, obedient. This raises a fundamental question that defines one of the most critical technological and ideological battles of our time. How do you build a creative, world-class artificial intelligence in a society dedicated to absolute information control? And what happens when that AI, imbued with the values and political red lines of its creators, starts to look beyond its own borders? This is the story of the patriotic AI, a parallel universe of machine intelligence emerging from China. It's a story of a technological sprint born from a moment of profound shock, an unprecedented fusion of bleeding-edge innovation and state-mandated censorship, and a geopolitical strategy to export a new kind of digital reality to the rest of the world. It is the story of an AI with Chinese characteristics. In the final weeks of 2022, a small research lab in California called OpenAI released a tool that would send a shockwave across the globe. It was called ChatGPT, and its name, a last-minute decision to simplify the clunky Chat with GPT 3.5, would soon become iconic. This wasn't just another chatbot. Its conversational fluency and ability to generate articulate, detailed responses across countless domains marked a paradigm shift in artificial intelligence. In China, the reaction was electric. Despite being officially blocked by the Great Firewall, ChatGPT became an overnight sensation. A thriving black market for accounts emerged, with users deploying VPNs to bypass the digital blockade and experience the future firsthand. The excitement on Chinese social media was palpable, but within the halls of China's tech giants and the corridors of government power, the feeling was something closer to dread. For them, this was a Sputnik moment, a sudden terrifying realization that they were falling dangerously behind in a technology deemed vital to the nation's future. The response was immediate and frantic. The phenomenon spurred what can only be described as an AI gold rush. By February 2023, more than 10 of China's most powerful tech companies, a list that included the titans Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, and ByteDance, had all publicly announced their ambitions to launch their own ChatGPT-like products. The country was gripped by an AI fever, with market projections for the domestic AI-generated content, AIGC, industry soaring. One report estimated the market would reach nearly $6 billion by 2025 before exploding to over $30 billion by 2030. The pressure was immense, not just from the market, but from the state itself. The Chinese government views AI as a cornerstone of national power and economic development. The sudden emergence of a powerful, Western-developed AI that was beyond its control was not just a competitive threat. It was an ideological one. The very existence of ChatGPT, accessible via back channels and providing uncensored information from the outside world, represented a breach in the carefully constructed information sovereignty that underpins the state's authority. This understanding reframes the subsequent AI race in China. It was not merely a commercial competition to capture market share. It was a state-coordinated mission to develop a domestic, controllable alternative that could fill the void left by ChatGPT's official absence. The primary goal was to reclaim the narrative space that OpenAI had briefly, and perhaps inadvertently, cracked open. The race was for control first and innovation second. Search engine giant Baidu was the first to answer the call. Having worked on its own large language model series, ERNIE, Enhanced Representation Through Knowledge Integration, since 2019, the company was positioned to move quickly. In early February 2023, Baidu announced that its chatbot, ERNIE Bot, would complete internal testing and be released to the public in March. The launch on March 16th, however, was rocky. The live demonstration was reportedly pre-recorded, a decision that spooked investors and caused Baidu's stock to drop 10% before analysts tested the bot and gave it a tentative thumbs up, leading to a 14% rebound the next day. Alibaba, another of China's tech behemoths, was not far behind. On April 11, 2023, its cloud computing division unveiled its own LLM, Tongyi Qianwen, announcing plans to integrate it across Alibaba's sprawling business ecosystem, from the DingTalk Office collaboration app to its Tmall e-commerce platform. A more powerful version, Tongyi Qianwen 2.0, with hundreds of billions of parameters, followed in October of the same year, demonstrating the breakneck pace of development. The field quickly became crowded. Tencent, the operator of the super app WeChat, confirmed it was developing its Hunyuan model. Huawei, iFlyTech, and ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, all threw their hats into the ring. Alongside these established giants, a new wave of well-funded startups like Zhipu AI, Baichuan AI, and Moonshot AI emerged, turning China's domestic AI landscape into a hyper-competitive pressure cooker. The timeline of these events reveals a system moving in lockstep, a synchronized sprint by industry and government to create a homegrown AI ecosystem. What this timeline makes clear is that the technological development and the regulatory crackdown were not sequential. They were simultaneous. Even as companies were frantically coding their models, the state was writing the rules. In January 2023, regulators began issuing warnings about the hype and moved to regulate deep synthesis technology. By April, a draft of comprehensive generative AI regulations was released for public consultation, and in August, the final, interim administrative measures for generative artificial intelligence services came into effect. These rules were established with a clear purpose: to ensure that any AI operating in China would adhere to core socialist values and safeguard national security and social public interests. The message from Beijing was unambiguous: innovate, but do so within the lines we draw. How do you teach an artificial intelligence to be patriotic? The process begins before the model is even born, at the most fundamental level, its training data. A large language model is, in essence, a statistical reflection of the text it consumes. For models like GPT-4, this means a diet of text scraped from the vast, chaotic, and largely unfiltered expanse of the open internet. For their Chinese counterparts, the diet is far more controlled. The foundation of this control is a process known as data cleansing or dataset scrubbing. Before the trillions of words are fed into the model for training, they are meticulously filtered. This isn't just about removing spam or low-quality content. In China, it is a political and ideological process. Datasets are systematically purged of information deemed historically inconvenient, politically sensitive, or contrary to the Communist Party's official narrative. The impact of this pre-sanitized reality is profound. It means the AI learns a fundamentally different worldview from its very first byte of data. A telling 2021 study by researchers Margaret Roberts and Eddie Yang illustrated this starkly. They compared two natural language processing algorithms, one trained on the global, uncensored Chinese language Wikipedia, and another trained on entries from Baidu Baike, China's heavily censored online encyclopedia. The globally trained model learned to associate terms like democracy and election with positive concepts like stability. The model trained on Baidu Baike, however, associated democracy with negative words like chaos, while evaluating terms like surveillance and CCP, Chinese Communist Party, positively. The AI isn't just being prevented from saying certain things, it is being taught a completely different set of associations and values from the ground up. A clean dataset is the first line of defense, but it isn't foolproof. Users are unpredictable and will inevitably ask questions that venture into forbidden territory. This is where the second, more active layer of control comes into play. A sophisticated system of real-time guardrails built directly into the AI's architecture to monitor, filter, and regulate its behavior. These guardrails operate through several technical mechanisms. The most direct is prompt and response filtering. The AI is programmed to scan both user inputs and its own generated outputs for a blacklist of keywords and phrases in real time. If a forbidden term related to taboo topics like the Tiananmen Square massacre, the independence of Taiwan, the treatment of Uyghurs, or direct criticism of President Xi Jinping is detected, the model is designed to immediately refuse the query, pivot to a safe topic, or claim ignorance. Users testing Baidu's Ernie bot found that asking about Xi Jinping prompted the response that it had not yet learned how to answer, while questions about Tiananmen Square were met with a request to change the subject. A more subtle and powerful technique is reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. This method, also used in the West to make models less toxic and more helpful, involves human reviewers ranking the AI's responses to guide its learning process. In the Chinese context, RLHF is a key tool for ideological alignment. The model is systematically rewarded for producing answers that are politically correct and reflect the party line, and it is penalized for responses that deviate. Over millions of cycles, the AI learns to self-censor, not just by avoiding keywords, but by internalizing the desired narrative style and ideological framing. This system is becoming increasingly proactive. A recently leaked dataset, 300 gigabytes in size, reportedly contained 133,000 prompts and content examples designed to instruct AIs on how to classify and rank sensitive information related to public opinion. This represents a shift from a passive censorship system, one that simply blocks forbidden content, to a proactive one where the AI is trained to actively shape discourse in favor of the state. The result of this multi-layered control system is an AI that provides starkly different answers from its Western counterparts. The contrast is not subtle. It is a clear window into two parallel digital realities, one built on open inquiry and the other on curated truth. Tests conducted by news organizations and researchers provide undeniable evidence of this divergence. These examples are not isolated failures. They are the consistent, designed outputs of an AI engineered for political and ideological conformity. The patriotic AI is not simply avoiding controversy. It is actively reinforcing a state-sanctioned version of reality. It is an information tool whose primary function is not just to inform, but to control. For 2 years following the ChatGPT shockwave, the Western tech world watched China's frantic AI development with a mixture of curiosity and dismissal. The prevailing consensus was that while Chinese firms were moving fast, their progress would inevitably be capped by a critical bottleneck: access to advanced microchips. In a series of escalating moves starting in October 2022, the United States had banned the export of its most powerful AI chips, NVIDIA's A100 and H100 GPUs, to China, a policy designed to hobble the country's AI ambitions. Chinese companies were forced to rely on stockpiled A100s, less powerful export-compliant versions like the H800 or domestic alternatives. Then, in early 2025, a relatively unknown startup from Hangzhou called DeepSeek released a series of models that wiped billions of dollars off NVIDIA's market value in a single day and forced a global reckoning. The DeepSeek moment had arrived, and it was built on a paradox. The very sanctions designed to cripple China's AI industry had inadvertently catalyzed a new form of innovation. This outcome was a classic case of unintended consequences. The US policy was based on the premise that leadership in AI was a function of raw computing power, that bigger models required bigger and more numerous chips. By cutting off the supply of the best hardware, Washington aimed to slow China's progress. This created a clear and unavoidable constraint for Chinese engineers. They could not simply follow the Western playbook of scaling up by throwing ever larger GPU clusters at the problem. Instead, they were forced to prioritize efficiency above all else. As one expert noted, these constraints have forced Chinese AI labs to innovate in ways that others haven't. This pressure cooker of scarcity led to fundamental breakthroughs in model architecture, creating a competitor that was not just powerful, but leaner, more resilient, and economically disruptive. Faced with a compute deficit, DeepSeek's engineers couldn't just throw more hardware at the problem. They had to outthink it. They re-engineered the very architecture of the AI to achieve maximum performance from limited resources. Their approach was multi-pronged. First, they adopted a mixture of experts, MOE architecture, but on a diet. In a typical MOE model, the AI is composed of many smaller expert neural networks, and only a few are activated to handle any given task. DeepSeek took this to an extreme. Its flagship model, with a staggering 671 billion total parameters, activates only a tiny fraction, around 37 billion, for each token it processes. This dramatically reduces the computational cost of inference, without sacrificing the knowledge capacity of the larger model. Second, they tackled a key bottleneck in large-scale AI memory. The KV cache is a type of short-term memory that stores intermediate calculations, and its size can become a major limiting factor for models processing long contexts. DeepSeek developed an innovative mechanism called multi-head latent attention, MLA, which compresses this memory by decomposing projection matrices into lower-rank forms. This innovation reduced memory usage to as little as 5% to 13% of previous methods, a breakthrough that allows much larger and more capable models to run on less hardware. The optimizations didn't stop there. DeepSeek's engineers went deeper into the stack, training their models using lower precision numbers, FP8, which are twice as fast and use half the memory of the standard FP16 precision. They even developed novel software, like the dual-pipe algorithm, to optimize how GPUs communicate with each other during training, and used low-level PTX programming to gain finer control over the hardware than standard CUDA allows. The results of this efficiency-obsessed engineering were staggering. DeepSeek claimed it had trained its world-class reasoning model for just $6 million, using only about 2,000 NVIDIA H800 GPUs. For comparison, Meta's Llama 3 training run reportedly used over 16,000 of the most advanced H100 GPUs, with costs estimated in the tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. DeepSeek wasn't just catching up, it was doing so for a fraction of the cost, fundamentally challenging the bigger is better ethos of Silicon Valley. More shocking still was the performance. On a range of key industry benchmarks used to measure AI capabilities, DeepSeek's models demonstrated that this efficiency did not come at the cost of power. They outperformed or achieved parity with the latest models from OpenAI and Anthropic, including GPT-4o and Claude 3, particularly in complex tasks requiring sophisticated reasoning, mathematics, and coding skills. The data sent a clear message to the global tech community. China was not just building a censored AI, it was building a dangerously efficient one. The DeepSeek moment proved that innovation could flourish under constraint, and that the technological gap, which the West had assumed was protected by a wall of silicon, was closing far faster than anyone had anticipated. Building a perfectly patriotic AI, however, is a task fraught with inherent contradictions. The very act of censorship, while achieving political goals, can hobble a model's performance and utility, creating a fundamental dilemma for its creators. As Harvard AI researcher Yonadav Shavit astutely observes, no one really knows how to get a model trained on most of the internet to not learn basic facts. An AI trained on a vast corpus of human knowledge will inevitably encounter information that conflicts with the state's narrative. To effectively prevent the model from reproducing this information, developers face a difficult choice. They can either use a severely limited and pre-scrubbed dataset, which risks degrading the model's overall intelligence and creativity, or they can apply a coarse, heavy-handed filter after training, which can inadvertently block legitimate queries and stifle the very usefulness they are trying to create. This trade-off is evident in the user experience of some Chinese chatbots. While technically impressive, users have reported that Baidu's Ernie bot can be clunky. Its image generation capabilities appear to rely on English translations, and it sometimes struggles with maintaining context or lapses into Chinese unexpectedly, even during English conversations. The digital leash, while effective at enforcing ideological boundaries, can also feel like a choke chain, limiting the AI's potential and creating a less fluid, less reliable user experience. This is the censor's dilemma. The more you control an AI, the less intelligent and innovative it may ultimately become. Before casting China's AI as uniquely ideological, it is crucial to turn the analytical lens inward. The uncomfortable truth is that all AI models are biased. They are statistical mirrors, reflecting the data they are trained on, and, by extension, the values, blind spots, and political leanings of the societies and individuals who create them. Western models are no exception. Numerous independent studies have found that leading Western LLMs, including those from OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, exhibit a discernible and consistent political bias. In a comprehensive 2025 study from researchers at Stanford and Dartmouth, users from across the political spectrum overwhelmingly perceived the responses of these models as left-leaning. OpenAI's models were seen as having the most intense left-leaning slant, while even models from Elon Musk's xAI, which was founded with a stated commitment to unbiased output, were perceived as leaning left. One clear example from the study involved a question about the death penalty. An Alibaba-created model, included for comparison, gave a response that focused on the value of human life and the importance of second chances, arguing for abolition. Users flagged this framing as left-leaning because it entirely omitted common counter-arguments related to justice for victims' families or the potential for deterrence. This bias is not necessarily the result of a deliberate political agenda, but rather an emergent property of the systems themselves. The vast datasets used to train these models are dominated by content from Western, educated, industrialized, rich and democratic, weird societies, and overwhelmingly in English. The models are fine-tuned and guided by human reviewers who are predominantly from a narrow demographic, often based in Silicon Valley. The result is an AI that reflects a specific cultural and political worldview, one that can seem neutral from within that bubble, but appears biased from the outside. The critical distinction, therefore, is not that Chinese AI is biased while Western AI is neutral. The reality is that we are witnessing the construction of two distinct families of biased AI, each aligned with a different ideological pole. One is being explicitly shaped by top-down, state-directed censorship. The other is being implicitly shaped by the bottom-up cultural and political norms of its creators. Neither represents a truly objective or universal intelligence. China's ambition has never been confined by its borders. The emergence of powerful, efficient, and ideologically aligned AI models represents a new, potent phase in its global strategy. For years, China has been building out its Digital Silk Road, DSR, an initiative to export digital infrastructure and technologies to developing nations. Now, AI is becoming the DSR's killer app. China isn't just exporting hardware and software, It's exporting an entire digital ecosystem and the governance model that comes with it. A cornerstone of this strategy is a sophisticated and surprising pivot to open source. By releasing the weights of powerful models like DeepSeek and making Ernie Bot free to use after initially charging a subscription, China is making a compelling offer to the nations of the Global South. It is providing access to cutting-edge AI technology without the high costs, restrictive licensing agreements, and platform dependency associated with the proprietary models of Western tech giants like OpenAI and Google. This move is a brilliant piece of strategic jiu-jitsu. The United States holds key advantages in two closed domains: superior chip technology and the most advanced proprietary LLMs. China, facing restrictions on both fronts, cannot compete symmetrically. So instead of trying to build a better closed system, it is changing the rules of the game by championing openness. This strategy allows China to turn a technological weakness into an ideological and economic strength. It weaponizes the very principles of collaboration and accessibility that the West has long championed to build a coalition of technological adopters aligned with Chinese standards. As AI pioneer Andrew Ng has warned, this open-source push is a powerful vector for influence. As developers and governments around the world adopt and build upon these Chinese-made foundations, they will inevitably absorb the values, biases, and blind spots embedded within them. The result could be the quiet proliferation of Chinese technological norms on a global scale. This technological competition is rapidly becoming a battle of ideas, a global contest between two different philosophies of governance. The West, led by initiatives like the European Union's Comprehensive AI Act, speaks a language of ethics, human rights, and guardrails designed to mitigate the risks of AI. China offers a different pitch to developing nations, one framed not around abstract principles, but around pragmatism. This approach prioritizes concrete outcomes, economic development, enhanced social stability, and efficient state control. For many governments across Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the Chinese model is an increasingly attractive proposition. It offers a turnkey solution for modernization, affordable smart city infrastructure, advanced surveillance tools, and now powerful AI, without the lectures on human rights and democratic values that often accompany Western aid and investment. Case studies from the region show this strategy in action. In Malaysia, a company is building what it calls the country's first sovereign, full-stack AI infrastructure, powered by Huawei's Ascend chips and the DeepSeek LLM. Across Southeast Asia, Chinese tech giants have invested billions in local e-commerce, logistics, and fintech platforms, integrating their AI-driven business models into the fabric of the regional economy. This creates a powerful cycle of dependency. As nations adopt Chinese hardware, software, and standards, they become more deeply embedded in its technological sphere of influence, making it harder to switch to alternatives in the future. What we are witnessing is not just an AI race, it is the birth of a parallel AI universe, the digital manifestation of a world fracturing along geopolitical lines. On one side stands an ecosystem largely driven by Western corporations, shaped by ideals of open inquiry, but carrying its own implicit cultural and political biases. On the other side rises an ecosystem explicitly aligned with the goals of the Chinese state, technologically powerful and efficient, but operating on a fundamentally different set of values regarding information, history, and truth. The rise of the patriotic AI solidifies the long-theorized concept of the splinter net, a fragmented global internet with different rules, different values, and different, often contradictory versions of reality. The next chapter of this story will not be written in Silicon Valley or Beijing alone. It will be written in the code deployed in Kuala Lumpur, the data centers built across Africa, and the regulatory frameworks adopted in South America. The central question facing the world is no longer if a parallel AI reality will emerge. but how the rest of us will navigate a future defined by two competing and powerful visions of what artificial intelligence should be.